Wow, you guys really had a lot to say about oleanders, which I love. This was a very active comment section, so I can't address every comment directly, but I do want to answer some of the most common questions that I saw in that video. Let's get into it. So first of all, I had quite a few people accuse me of lying about oleander being poisonous. I am not lying. Oleander is poisonous. Please do not eat it. I had a lot of people in the comments accuse me of exaggerating oleander's toxicity. Now, in that video, I said that a small piece of leaf would be enough to unalive a full-grown adult. But since I got all these comments, I did a little bit more research into this. And as you may imagine, the exact dosages are not available for how much a lethal dose of oleander would be for various people. However, from what I could tell, from what I did read, looking into this a little bit more, a small piece of leaf would not be enough to unalive a full-grown adult, but it would be enough to unalive a child. And a full-grown adult would probably need to ingest more like 2 or 3 leaves. But 5 to 10 leaves is enough to kill a horse. Like, that is the statistic that I read. That's the data that I have. That was on like a veterinary information page that was enough to kill a horse. So I think my dosage may have been a little high, but not that far off. Which brings me to another thing that people were arguing about in the comment section. Is oleander lethal to horses? Yes, it is. People were right to point out that oleander does not taste good, so animals are not necessarily seeking this plant out. They're not like going and eating a bunch of it and then passing away. With horses, what tends to happen is they're eating a bunch of other vegetation that happens to have some oleander pieces in it that gets mixed in with everything else they're eating, and horses eat a lot, so within what they eat in a day, they have 5 to 10 oleander leaves, and that can cause a fatality. So it is fatal for horses. That's more what we're talking about when we talk about it being dangerous to horses. Same thing with other pets. Again, they're not seeking it out, but they may ingest some along with other things that they're eating, and that's where you get into trouble. There were also people in the comments claiming that they ate oleander as children and were fine. I am skeptical that that could be true. I'm not saying that these people are lying, but I am putting forth the theory that if you ate oleander as children, you would at the very least be very sick and have to go to the hospital, or be vomiting, be dizzy, be nauseous. Like, there's some really severe, like, have rapid breathing, have a very irregular heartbeat. Like, it causes some really severe symptoms. So if you ingested oleander as a child, you would know. You would definitely know, because there would be physical consequences. So I'm not saying that those people are lying, but they could think that they ate oleander, but it wasn't oleander. I'm not assuming that everybody knows what plant I'm talking about. So, and also as a kid, do you know what that plant is? I don't know. So I'm skeptical that that could be the case. Along the same lines, there were a lot of people in the comments who were like, I had oleander in my backyard and we just played alongside it and it was fine. Or we had oleander in my backyard and we made lays out of it and it was fine. Yes, I in no way meant to imply that somehow just by touching it, you would be subject to lethality. It is not absorbed through the skin, although from what I've read, it is a skin irritant. So it could have given you a rash if you made a lay out of it. I wouldn't recommend it. Might give you a little bit of a skin irritation, but you would have to actually ingest it. So by ingesting it, I mean eating it, drinking it, breathing it in. And that brings me to the next part of the comment section, which was all about people who were sickened or passed away from breathing in smoke from oleander fires. This were stories of people who maybe were unhoused and they were burning oleander to keep warm. and or people who there was a house fire and the bush caught fire and it sickened people. This does seem to be a real problem. I couldn't find any evidence of people passing away from the smoke, but I did find some articles that talked about people getting sick from the fire and having to be treated. So I wouldn't recommend burning it. I wouldn't recommend being around it burning. I think it could make you really sick, and I wouldn't want that to happen to anybody. But I do want to say that there was one set of stories in the comments that sent me to Snopes to investigate whether it was actually true or not, and that is the story of Boy Scouts roasting hot dogs on oleander stems or sticks and eating the hot dogs and passing away because they ate the hot dogs. Now, that does appear to be an urban legend. People who have gotten sick or who have passed away from ingesting oleander have done it by actually eating the plant, not putting something on the plant, or like not cooking with the plant and then ingesting, because that's not going to give you enough toxicity. And apparently, according to Snopes, someone actually did an experiment where they took the oleander sticks and they roasted hot dogs on oleander sticks, and then they tested the hot dogs to see how much of the toxin was in them, and it wasn't enough to do anybody any harm. So that story of the Boy Scouts being unalived by roasting hot dogs on oleander sticks is actually really old, and those stories have been going around, I guess, since the Napoleonic Wars, which is kind of funny. So I think that I wouldn't advise roasting any food on oleander sticks, and apparently, according to the experiment, they're not very easy to roast sticks on. Like it's a shrub. It's not like a tree, so it's thin. So the scientists had a hard time getting the hot dogs on the oleander. I'm just imagining that somebody paid researchers to do this. But yeah, they had trouble getting the oleanders onto the hot dogs. And so, but they managed to do it, and then they tested the hot dogs, and there was nothing in there. So in that case, I don't think that was true. I do like the story though. It's very, it's scary. It's gripping. Like, it's a good story. I can see why people tell it, but I think that you can roast your hot dogs without fear. And the last thing that came up in the comments that I'm so excited to talk about is the book and or movie White Oleander, which, you guys, this is a very, very juicy piece of pop culture from the early 2000s. So I read it because there was a time period when I read everything on Oprah's book club. I had to stop because some of those books got really dark. And if you will learn something about my reading habits by me saying that White Oleander wasn't the darkest thing on Oprah's book club, and like White Oleander didn't take me off of it. It was actually a couple books after that where I was like, okay, I'm off. But White Oleander, what a good book. I have not seen the movie, but now you guys maybe want to watch it. But I read the book. It's wonderful. I recommend it. It's dark, very, very dark. It's the story of, it's a coming of age story of a woman who grows up with a narcissistic mom who commits a violent crime, which you can probably guess what it is based on the title, but it goes into great detail. The only quibble I have with the role of oleander in that book is, from what I've read, it's actually red oleander that is more toxic than white oleander. It has a higher concentration of the toxins. Very interesting. But it's a fantastic book, and from what I've heard in the comments, it's a great movie too. So I know what I'm going to be watching this weekend. So thank you all so much for indulging me in this conversation about oleanders. And someone asked me for more information about toxic plants in California, so I'm going to do a little research, get back to you with some more info.